I think the main reason why it might be fair to criticize the Web Planet is because, let's face it, like, if we read these as scripts, these are Bill Strutton's scripts are not very strong here. Let's be honest. It's the execution. Excuse me. It's the execution that makes this interesting. Richard Martin's direction. He's not a Douglas Camfield or a Christopher Barry, but I think the work here was ultimately quite visually appealing, and there's a certain novelty in an uncanny factor in viewing something as silly and odd as the Web Planet aesthetically. We have to remember a lot of the classic Doctor Who scripts up to this point, they're not necessarily strong, but just the execution is quite interesting. If you read them as scripts, they wouldn't be nearly as compelling. Anthony Coburn's scripts for An Unearthly Child are nothing special. Warris Hussein's execution just is what it is. Terry Nation's scripts for the Daleks kind of are what they are. There's too many of them. Christopher Barry's execution is much better. Richard Martin's, as I discussed during my Daleks retrospective, a bit less so. David Whittaker's scripts for Edge of Destruction are really strong, and I think Richard Martin and Frank Cox executed it well. Cox's direction I thought was better overall. Luca Rotti's scripts for Marco Polo aren't. I think it's more about the legend of the sets and such, and Warris Hussein would have handled. It seems like he handled it beautifully. If you just read John Luca Rotti's scripts, and I believe you can, they aren't all that. Terry Nation's scripts of The Keys of Marinus, they're okay. The John Gray direction is really good in all cases. It's quite a varied series of sets and scenarios, as we know. John Luca Rotti's scripts for the Aztecs, not the biggest fan. John Crockett's execution was good. Peter R. Newman's scripts for the Censorites are some of the strongest thus far, though Mervyn Penfield and then Frank Cox's execution is really paramount to their effect. Dennis Spooner's scripts for The Reign of Terror are pretty good, but Henry Kirsch's direction, the set that they build and how authentic and believable it is, I mean, it's, as I said during that retrospective, it's easy to devise and compose Revolution-era France than it was to, Aztec Empire or the Himalayas / Kublai Khan's palace, though Kublai Khan's palace, based on photographs, looked phenomenal. Lewis Mark's scripts of Planet of Giants, but Mervyn Penfield and Douglas Camfield's direction was excellent. Terry Nation's scripts of the Dalek Invasion of Earth were quite good, and Richard Martin's direction was very sound for the most part. David Whittaker's scripts of The Rescue were kind of so-so. Christopher Barry's direction saved it. Dennis Spooner's scripts of Romans weren't outstanding, but I think Christopher Barry's scripts, again, and the performances from the cast saved it. And then, Bill Strutton's scripts of the Web Planet, they're not that great. Richard Martin's direction, if anything, quite saves it. Let's see what the reception and the critical response was for the Web Planet. The first episode was criticised by Peter Black of the Daily Mail, who described the main characters as the dullest quartet in fiction. Wow, that's just not true, obviously. But it's the Daily Mail. Okay. Comments from younger viewers read on junior points of view were mixed. Some found the episode exciting and hair-raising, while others complained about the pointless, noisy bleeping of the Zabi. I like it. I know it would get tiring after a while, especially if you watched all 6 episodes in a row. Holy shit. Following the broadcast of the second episode, Patrick Skeen Catling of Punch, what an old public. We studied World War I Punch cartoons in fucking high school. Wrote that the serial was guilty of ludicrous bathos. Bathos is an interesting term applied to that old barbarian text. Not barbarian text. That's like the opposite of, it's like a kind of counterpart to pathos, where when you're analysing an author's pathos and you're fascinated by it, rather you like what it indicates about their failures. Say it's an ineffective artistic work and what it says about them. Like what's that famous example? That barbarian story from the early 70s that people. Someone will name it in the comments. Whatever. After the third episode, Bill Edmond of the Stage and Television Today described the lighting effects as pointless and annoying. Following the 5th episode, the Sunday Mirror received a complaint from A.N. Thompson that the show was slipping due to its newly comedic nature. At the BBC Programme Review Board in March 1965, Alasdair Milne said that the series was difficult to follow unless one watched every edition. At the following review board, controller of programmes Hugh Weldon said that the serial was going well, while BBC One controller Michael Peacock felt that the series had too much mumbo-jumbo and that the character names were difficult to follow. Kind of true, actually. In April, the Scotsman's Peggy Phillips considered the serial to be a flop. I like the difficult-to-follow nature. It kind of becomes an ethereal, unusual nightmare. An audience report prepared following the serial's broadcast indicated satisfaction with its conclusion and choreography, but confusion regarding the action and criticism of the costumes and blurred lens. Retrospective reviews were mixed. In the Discontinuity Guide 1995, writers Paul Cornell Martin and Keith Topping praised the serial's imagination and ambition, but noted that it was slow and silly looking by modern standards. In the Television Companion 1998, David J. Howe and Stephen James Walker said that the story's ambition may be seen as its great strength or its great weakness, depending on the spirit in which it is approached. In A Critical of History of Doctor Who 1999, John Kenneth Moore described the serial as a noble experiment despite its mixed execution. He praised the costumes for the Zarbi, but criticised the Menoptera suits, alien voices, blurred lens, and Strutton's unoriginal scripts. In 2008, Mark Braxton of Radio Times acknowledged the costume design efforts and superbly atmospheric sets, though felt that they had not aged well. He felt that the story had an almost total absence of excitement, but enjoyed its ambition and deeper meaning about good versus evil. In 2009, Den of Geeks' Cliff Chapman ranked The Web Planet among the most underrated classic Doctor Who serials, noting it is a joy for being so different, even if the ambition might outstrip the execution. Definitely, sure. In 2012, Neela Debnath of The Independent found the story enjoyable, with ambitious writing that lacks impact given the poor quality of the visuals. In 2015, 12th Doctor actor Peter Capaldi said that the ambition and imagination was great, but they just didn't have the resources to deliver. Well, there you go. I think we can end this retrospective here. Thanks again, friends. Do tune in next time if you're so inclined to part 6 of The Web Planet here on AOD.